not. Last night, the big debate, Corbyn and then May, first interviewed by an audience, then grilled by Jeremy Paxman. And in many ways, Mrs May had a pretty tough time of it last night until the last question that Paxman asked her. And then when she answered, when she said, no deal is better than a bad deal, she got the audience to clap. Before, they'd been deriding her. Corbyn appearing, I think, to many, to have come out of the experience better, although perhaps a little bit evasive on how he might deal with terrorism. Well, this morning, it has to be said, Jeremy Corbyn had, and I'm doing my best to be neutral, but it was a total nightmare of an interview when he didn't know what Labour's proposals for childcare would actually cost. And of course that follows on from Diane Abbott, who proved to Nick Ferrari that she couldn't do basic arithmetic, and indeed John McDonnell, the shadow Chancellor, who didn't know what the size of a deficit was. But the other feature of today, perhaps the main political feature of today, is Nicola Sturgeon has launched the SNP manifesto. It's the last of the party manifestos. It includes, I think, two key things that really stand out for me. The first is they want to hold a second independence referendum at the end of the Brexit process, namely giving Scotland the chance to reject whatever deal Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn, let's be fair, may get. And the second, which I found fascinating, a call on the next UK government to increase health spending per head of population in England to the current Scottish level, which is 7% higher. And I'll make no comment on that, but to say that all the party manifestos are out. And I'm asking you, with all of them published, will they make any difference to the way in which you vote? Which one, if any of them, inspired you? And I ask that as the leader of a party in 2015 that for the first independently costed, we hold it would set the gold standard for manifestos. And you know something? At the end of it, I'm not convinced, despite all that effort, all that hard work, all that press coverage, I'm not convinced that more than about 3 people actually read that manifesto in 2015. In fact, I'm beginning to wonder whether manifesto launches aren't all a bit of a charade. Am I becoming too cynical in my old age? Well, if I am, say don't be so. I read them cover to cover. If that's the case, call me on 0345 60 60 973. If you think I'd rather read the terms and conditions of my latest gas bill than read a manifesto, then you can text 84850. Or if you think I've never read one in my life and it'll make no difference to the way I vote, well, tweet Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, you can watch us on LBC's Facebook page live right now. I'm going to go to John in Hailsham. John, who has inspired you, if anybody?
Yeah, good evening, Nigel. I must admit, I've been watching the political debates, and of all the people I've seen so far interviewed by, say, Andrew Neil, without a doubt, Paul Nuttall has definitely come out the most professional of all of them. And I really do feel their sort of manifesto, the UKIP's manifesto, is certainly the best one. And I'm actually going to be voting. I am going to be voting UKIP. I do feel that Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May, when they've been interviewed, they certainly have fallen well short of the mark. But Paul Nuttall, I think, certainly has been very professional.
What was it, John? What was it in particular that impressed you about Nuttall?
I think he's putting the right policies forward. I mean, without a shadow of doubt, we have to accept the fact that obviously migration is one of the biggest problems in in Britain, I should say. And I think Paul Nuttall has put through logical policies would definitely would probably get us out of the problems we're in at the moment.
So John, just to get back to my original question and chat tonight, it sounds like it's Paul Nuttall's personality and Paul Nuttall's answer to questions that impresses you more than actually the UKIP manifesto.
Well, no, I do really feel that UKIP's policies, I'm in total agreement with the policies, but at the same time as saying that, Paul Nuttall, he was put, obviously, Andrew Neil puts any politician under pressure, doesn't he? And
I know, I've been there.
And I do really feel that Paul Nuttall of the interviews I've viewed so far, Paul Nuttall definitely did stand up under pressure.
OK, no fun. And, John, one last trick question for you.
Yep.
Have you actually read the UKIP manifesto?
I haven't read it in full, but I've looked through the basics of the discussions that have taken place, and I've looked at the policies that Paul Nuttall has actually described when he has been interviewed.
Okay.
And personally, I'm voting UKIP anyway.
Fine. John, thank you. So John in Helsham is actually inspired by Paul Nuttall and what he's seen of the manifesto, though John did admit he hasn't actually read it. I wonder whether we can find any callers that have read them all. I'll go to Frank in Islington. Frank, has anybody inspired you with their manifesto?
Yes, the Labour one. Because
Okay.
they say it's costed. Now, this thing about costed, on today, people have spent ages on the telephone, also on the TV, trying to make someone look silly because they didn't know the cost of something. It doesn't matter to me what the cost is. It's a question of if the manifesto is good, you plan to do a lot of good stuff, the money will always turn up if you do it properly. And the point is, the Bank of England will print money on a computer any time you want it. There's no problem at all. The idea of,
Frank,
what does it cost? What does it cost? I'll get sick of it.
Frank, there are two issues here. The first is the word costed. Now, Labour and the Lib Dems have put great store on the fact that they've got costed manifestos, which means their manifesto proposals have gone to a third party who've said, do you know what, these sums work, they add up. And that is what I was talking about, Frank, earlier, that actually the manifesto that I helped to launch in 2015 was said at the time to have set the gold standard for manifestos. These are standards that would be expected in future. Interestingly, Theresa May and the Conservatives have deliberately had an uncosted manifesto. So when last night Jeremy Paxman asks her what the cost of this will be, what the cap will be, etc., she doesn't feel she has to answer. In terms of cost, well, that's, of course, a different thing. But what is it? I mean, what's the one thing about the Labour manifesto that really stands out to you as being the winner?
It's the one which says that they will look after the elderly into the future. And also, they'll look after the students into the future as well. Both ends of the spectrum get a good run for their money.
So the people in the middle have to pay for it all, Frank, do they?
Probably they do, because they're the ones doing the work.
Yeah, OK, no, fine. No, fine. And Frank, tell me, have you actually had a copy of the Labour manifesto? Have you read it?
No, I've only taken in notice of all the headlines.
Yep, no, fine. Frank, thank you. Thank you. Frank is inspired by the Labour manifesto. They're going to look after the young and the old. Barry in Canning Town, who's inspired you? Anybody?
Do you know what, Nigel? I was looking this weekend thinking I'm going to have a look at the manifestos and read through them and see which one talks to me. But actually, the party's behaviours with their manifesto has really put me off looking at them. You've got one party that can't tell you the costed details of it, can't remember, not even details, but significant, high-profile numbers that they need to get right. And you've got other parties which are already backpedaling on what they've said in the manifestos. So it just shows me that I don't actually trust anything that's written in the manifestos.
Well,
because they
do you know, Barry,
hold them in high regard.
Isn't it fascinating that, I think remarkable that Theresa May has U-turned on a manifesto pledge before the elections even happened, and there's Corbyn this morning going on to Woman's Hour to talk specifically about childcare. About that one. And I know, because I've been there, Barry, I know remembering all of it when you've got an 88-page manifesto or whatever it is, isn't easy. But when you're going on a programme to talk about that issue, not to remember the number, it's a bit embarrassing, really, isn't it?
Well, if you're going to launch a strategy for anything, you need to know the highlight things that you need to announce. And with all what's gone on recently, you know that if you're going to go on Women's Hour to launch something about childcare, the thing that's probably going to come up is how much is it going to cost. It was an inevitable question. Yeah. And to not even have that fingertips written on the back of your hand or whatever, it just demonstrates that it doesn't demonstrate a lot to me. But equally,
so, Barry, tell me something. Barry, tell me.
Go on.
Are the manifestos, are they worth the paper they're written on?
I don't know. I'm not even going to pick one up because I don't think that the communists are their reality. So I don't. In that case, no, they're not, because they're not going to communicate to anybody.
Barry, you're a star. Thank you. Have to say, I'm getting very cynical. I rather agree with Barry. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
But if you look at some polls, in one survey, it's quite extraordinary. Theresa May's net approval rating lead over Jeremy Corbyn has fallen from 56 points to 22. Michael Brown is former Conservative MP.
We could be facing in 10 days' time Diane Abbott in charge of our security, John McDonnell the Marxist in charge of our wealth, or rather losing our wealth, and Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister.
Peter Edwards, who's editor of Labour List, a blog supporting the Labour Party.
Whatever you feel about David Cameron, he generally stuck to his guns, whereas Theresa May, first of all, national insurance in the budget, then no election, then we had one. She is all over the place.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, now open in Aberdeen.
He just loves the ducks, does Charlie. How they come right up to us when we feed them. There's one we call Jemima who keeps the others in line. She's just like your mum, I tell him. He needn't know I didn't get out at all last week. Let me throw us a sore, I could hardly get a cup of tea down. Not that I could taste it anyway. See, I might have cancer, but the most important thing is that I'm his granddad.
A granddad with cancer is still a granddad. We're here to support you, because life with cancer is still life, and we're here to help you live it. We are Macmillan Cancer Support.
Your future is here. The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Find out more at globalacademy.com.
Here at Sick Holiday, we have our own food scientist because we take getting food poisoning on holiday very seriously. It's not your fault if you get sick at a resort with poor hygiene. Most of us save up for one holiday a year, and to have it ruined with food poisoning is not acceptable. If you've been sick on a package holiday in the last 3 years, claim up to £2,000 per person, which could make up for the holiday you missed out on. Click sickholidayradio.com or text SICK to 66777.
I've broken down, Churchy. Cars like me belong in the fast lane, not the hard shoulder.
Oh, yes.
Oh, now I'm really going to blow a gasket.
No.
Don't end up stranded when you break down. Churchill offers new motor customers free breakdown cover.
Oh, Churchy, my knight in furry armour.
Oh.
Churchill, depend on the dog. First year free breakdown service provided by Green Flag, roadside only, new business policies only, excludes NI, underwritten by UK Insurance Limited, terms and conditions apply.
People who've had their dental implants at TDC Implant Centre have had their lives transformed.
I had problems with other dentists who said it was just too complicated.
I'm Dr. Michael Zivitz. Even if your own dentist has told you nothing can be done, talk to us. Our award-winning treatment could give you a life-changing smile. In just 1 day, we'll give you a full set of beautiful teeth fixed in your mouth. Around 3 months later, we exchange your fixed teeth for a new permanent set.
I just wanted to get it sorted properly so I had permanent teeth again.
So see smileinaday.co.uk.
Creating a perfect holiday with Travel Republic is just like creating anything. You start off with the basics, like, I want a beach holiday. Then you add a little more. A 4-star hotel. Then you add a few more flourishes. Near the beach, a local restaurant, flights from your favourite airport, and it's all been reviewed by people like you. And before you know it, you've made something really special. Book your perfect holiday. Search Travel Republic now. Travel Republic, yours for the making. At or protected.
Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag FarageOnLBC.
With the launch of the SNP manifesto and 10 days to go, all the parties' manifestos are out there in the open. I'm not convinced anyone has actually read them, that they're really worth the paper they're written on. But, of course, we do get the fillets of the manifesto fed to us through the media. And I'm asking you, whether you read it or not, which of those manifestos has really inspired you? And on text I get, Nigel, you missed the point. The electorate don't need to read the manifesto. Andrew Neil does that and forensically interrogates the politicians. Annabelle, well, not just Andrew Neil, I think Nick Ferrari is having a pretty good campaign too, and others. The best manifesto was a UKIP leaflet dropped through the letterbox giving the bullet points of their manifesto, says David. The problem with manifestos is they're written by lousy fiction writers completely out of touch with reality, says Richard in Chelsea. Bella says, I could never ever vote for Corbyn. Yeah, but Bella, the question was, have you seen his manifesto? Maybe you have. And Paul says to me, as you're meant to be a neutral broadcaster, Nigel, try saying something nice about Jeremy Corbyn. Well, Paul, last night, after he'd spoken with the audience, with Faisal Islam, and he'd then done the 18 minutes with Jeremy Paxman, I put out on Twitter that whilst I didn't agree with Jeremy Corbyn's politics, I thought he came across as a very genuine person. I got 6,000 retweets in a few hours, including Labour MPs, saying I never thought we'd put out stuff from Farage, but we have. I couldn't actually have been nicer about Corbyn. And remember, please, Paul, that on the day of the Labour manifesto launch, I said on this programme that I thought he'd put more vim and vigour and passion and energy into that than anything I'd ever seen him do before. And Paul, thirdly, I've said again and again on this programme, the only party leader who really appears to be enjoying himself out there on the road is Jeremy Corbyn. That was until, Paul, this morning. And I think what happened this morning was a total car crash. Listeners, if you think I'm wrong, if you think that interview was okay, you call 0345 6060 973 and you tell me that I'm wrong. I'm going next to Andy in the Netherlands. Andy, are you voting in the UK election?
Sadly, I'm not, because of EU law, that won't let me. So then that's another reason to get out of the EU. But sorry about that, but the quicker we're out of the EU, the better. It stinks, trust me. I've read all 5 of the manifestos. I've read from...
Now, hang on. Andy. When you say you've read all 5 of the manifestos, do you actually mean that?
Yeah, I've read them all online, yeah.
What, all of it?
The Green Party. The ones that
now, the Green...
they've got a money tree and unicorns in the back garden.
Now, the Green Party one was quite short, wasn't it? It was about 22 pages, wasn't it?
Something like that, and it was how can I say, it must have been put together by a bunch of 5-year-olds at an infant school. Because
and how big was the
figures is absolutely
how big was the Tory manifesto? How big was the Tory manifesto, Andy?
It was about 80 pages, I think. I can't remember exactly, right. But I went a bit dizzy from reading it because it contradicted itself. And
Well, Andy, just one thing. I've got the Tory manifesto in front of me, and you're right. It is just over 80 pages, so you're not pulling the wool over my eyes. You actually genuinely have sat down and read all 5 party manifestos. Andy, have you got nothing better to do in your life?
Yeah, I have, but that's of an evening. that's of an evening. No, when it comes to politics, Nigel, and anybody starts having a go at me on social media, I like to get my facts right before I open my mouth. This is where the major 3 parties, from the Lib Dems to the Conservatives and Labour Party, have got the facts actually wrong. Even the Green Party. Because I'm just wondering, with the deficit that the UK's got at the moment, and with...
Hang on, Andy. We're not discussing the deficit. We're not discussing the deficit or debt. Do you realise there was an hour and a half of leaders' debates last night on television where Faisal Islam or Jeremy Paxman did not once ask the Prime Minister or the man challenging to be Prime Minister about debt or deficit? I found the whole thing almost unbelievable.
That's true, because that's the simple reason that they're not telling people in the manifestos. But it's where, I'm sorry to say this, I'm going to have to be biased on this, the UKIP manifesto came across very strong, very open and very honest of where the money's going to be coming from for the UK in the next 2 years. Now, funny enough that Paul, for the past few months, has been saying the word 11 billion. And amazing, all the other party leaders are starting saying, we're going to be spending 11 billion on this, 11 billion on that. But to hear Corbyn this morning, you could actually hear the brakes screeching outside because it was such a car crash. It was as bad as Diane Abbott's. I'm sorry to say, he may come across as a fantastic bloke and wanting world peace and blah, blah, blah. But his policies, with everything else that he's got in line, he's living in cloud cuckoo land.
So basically, Andy, you're sort of a little bit pleased with the UKIP one, but not happy with the rest of them. Is that kind of your position?
My position is who's paying for this in the long run? And that'll be the everyday working man and woman.
Our grandchildren, Andy. Our grandchildren, Andy. Since 2010, our national debt has more than doubled. That's the debt we've been accumulating since the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and nobody, Andy, is even talking about it. But you've had a good look at it, and I absolutely congratulate you for having read 5 party manifestos. Andy, you may be the only person tonight that has done so, and I thank you. John, in Henley-on-Thames, who's inspired you, John? Or is it all really a rather cynical exercise?
I think it's rather cynical. I'm afraid I've lost faith in both the major parties, the Tories and the Labour. The Tories will not give figures on a cap regarding the dementia tax. They will give no information on how they will decide on what pensioners will lose the winter fuel allowance. And to say that they're going to consult various organisations on this is just rubbish, because they already know. And Labour, I mean, they just cannot get any figures right on any of their policies.
Well, John, arguably, John, Labour have got their figures right in the manifesto. It's just that their leader and senior operatives can't remember them when they appear on radio or television.
And we want them to run our country when they can't remember things like that?
Well, you could argue that at least... John, you could argue at least they've tried to cost it. The Tories haven't even bothered.
No, I agree with that, but the thought of Diane Abbott as our Home Secretary is absolutely frightening. Absolutely frightening. I mean, how do they expect us to vote for them when Labour gets so many things wrong on figures and the Tories will not give our pensioners, which is a great proportion of the voters, any information?
It's about, I think, John, it's nearly 12 million people now, isn't it, who are
That's
of
right,
pensioner
yes,
age.
and increasing, and they've known this for decades. They've known it would be increasing for decades, and nothing's been done.
So, John, you're pretty uninspired by the whole election, aren't you?
I am, yes. I mean, I have a postal vote. I've already voted, but I didn't vote for Tory or the Labour.
Right, okay.
I mean, both of them will continue borrowing and borrowing and borrowing.
Yeah. Debt. Yeah, it's running. It's still running. It's still running at £52 billion a year. That is the amount by which we're living beyond our means. John, I thank you. Yvette in Cheltenham, who has inspired you, Yvette, with their manifesto? Or haven't you bothered to read them?
Well, I'm sorry to say you're right. I haven't actually haven't bothered to read them because I've kept my eye on the main ball, which is that I'm going to vote for the party which I think will make the best deal with the bullies of Europe, I'm afraid, because it's more important to me that we don't pay £100 billion as a punishment fee to Brussels than anything else at the moment. That's the main issue, and I think we're taking our eye off the ball when we forget that and concentrate on more domestic issues at the moment.
So, Yvette, for you, this is the Brexit election, yeah?
Yes, it is indeed. And why is Theresa May calling it a divorce, or why is it being allowed to be called a divorce when actually it's just a resignation? A resignation doesn't need a settlement. A divorce might do.
Well, we're leaving the club.
A divorce.
We're leaving the club, and we have huge investments and assets in that club. Yvette, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Nigel, there's so much wriggle room due to manifestos being open to interpretation that they are virtually meaningless. Also, they're voided in the event of a coalition government, says Rob. Well, Nick Clegg found that out, didn't he? Boy. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Glenn Thompson.
Jeremy Corbyn has apologised for not being able to put a cost on his party's new childcare policy. When asked how much the government would have to pay to offer 30 hours a week to all 2 to 4-year-olds in England, the Labour leader couldn't answer. Rolf Harris has been formally cleared of indecently assaulting 3 teenage girls. The former entertainer was found not guilty of 4 charges that he carried out sex attacks on girls as young as 13 between 1971 and 1983. And Commons Speaker John Bercow wants to remain in the position until the year 2022, despite previously saying he'd stand down next year. He said the snap election and the European Union referendum had persuaded him to change his mind. LBC weather: rain from the west should clear, then mostly dry and clear for northern areas, cloudy and milder in the south, and lows of 9 degrees.
This is LBC.
Good morning. Welcome to Heathrow Meet and Greet parking. Simply pass us your keys and we'll park your car for you here at Heathrow. And it's just a walk to the terminal so you can begin your holiday sooner. Get closer to family time with official Heathrow Meet and Greet parking. Visit heathrow.com/parking to book. Closer. Heathrow. Terms and conditions apply and are available at heathrow.com/parking.
My thing? My abs. They're big on Instagram. Well, they were until I dropped a dumbbell on my phone. Anyway, I need a replacement. 12 megapixel camera for maximum muscle definition. But my budget is lower than my body fat ratio. So, you know what? It's got to be refurb.
Russell's thing. It's clearly a refurbished smartphone from eBay. That's as good as new with 12-month seller warranty. Buy refurbished tech on eBay and save up to 50% versus new. eBay. Find your thing.
We've been thinking about pruning. Not your peonies or your privet, but your cost of living. And how, from broadband to mobile phones, these days we're all looking for ways to trim our spending. And then we thought, couldn't we help you cut back on your biggest outgoing? And we thought, yes, we could. So we'll always try to help you remortgage to a better rate and save on your monthly repayments. Mortgages for how life is now. NatWest. We are what we do.
Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Block management. 2 very simple words. But what do they actually mean? Well, there's budget approval for starters, then service charge invoices, health and safety paperwork, cleaning, gardening, maintenance, inspections, contracts, insurance, emergency call-outs, and a whole lot more besides.
So for complete block management solutions, just remember 3 simple letters: ABC. ABC Estates will take care of all your day-to-day management, leaving you as happy as Larry. See abcestates.co.uk or call 0800 888 6688.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Well, I'm speaking tonight from Estoril, which is just to the west of Lisbon. I've been at a big conference today where they're discussing mass migration and the future of the European Union. And, there are plenty of Brits here. There are members of the House of Lords here, some of whom earned their money in Brussels for many, many years. And I have to say, I'm not sure that I've been a particularly popular hit here today because they are all completely obsessed with Brexit. They're terrified of Brexit because, of course, they realise that the UK leaving is the equivalent to the economies of the 20 smallest countries of the European Union leaving. Yeah, that's right. The UK economy is as big as the 20 smallest countries of the EU. But I'm here and I'm doing it because one of the things I promised was, I said I wouldn't stand for the UK Parliament. I would continue with my job as leader of group in the European Parliament, and I would travel around Europe saying to people, give the Brits a reasonable deal. So I've been appealing to the Portuguese today and saying, through their media particularly, and saying, look, we have a relationship, a friendship. We've been allies for many, many centuries. In fact, the British-Portuguese relationship is the oldest alliance in the world. And I'm saying to them, please, when those bullies, Juncker, and people like him, want to punish Britain for leaving, make the common sense case for us to have a sensible free trade deal. And I'm here today. I was in Estonia a couple of Fridays ago, and I will be in the next few months in the Czech Republic, in Germany, and elsewhere. It is perhaps a bit of a one-man crusade, but then I've done one-man crusades for the whole of my life. And we're talking, though, today about the manifesto launches. And the SNP have launched this really big, strong anti-austerity manifesto where they are even calling on the UK government to increase health spending per head of population in England to a level that is the same as Scotland. Some people may wonder where all of that money in Scotland even comes from. And of course they want a second referendum on, they call it independence, I call it separation, at the end of the Brexit process. So all the manifesto.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
But if you look at some polls, in one survey, it's quite extraordinary. Theresa May's net approval rating lead over Jeremy Corbyn has fallen from 56 points to 22. Michael Brown is former Conservative MP.
We could be facing in 10 days' time Diane Abbott in charge of our security, John McDonnell the Marxist in charge of our wealth, or rather losing our wealth, and Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister.
Peter Edwards, who's editor of Labour List, a blog supporting the Labour Party.
Whatever you feel about David Cameron, he generally stuck to his guns, whereas Theresa May, first of all national insurance in the budget, then no election, then we had one. She is all over the place.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, now open in Aberdeen.
So we've seen all the manifestos, the SNP being the last of them, and I'm asking you, which of these manifestos has inspired you? Who amongst you has actually read them? And we did get a caller from the Netherlands who'd read all 5. My feeling as a party leader in the election of 2015 is that parties work incredibly hard on producing and publishing manifestos with pictures and shiny covers, and I'm not actually convinced manifestos of their own right really change anything at all. And I notice from some of your texts and tweets that actually none of you think they're going to be on it anyway. But perhaps I'm becoming too cynical. Robin Leamington, tell me I've got this wrong and you've been inspired by the manifesto of one of the parties.
Good evening, Nigel. No, I haven't really been inspired by any of them in particular. The point I just wanted to make is that, I mean, well, apart from that guy in Holland, no one reads the manifestos, obviously. I mean, we've all got better things to do. But but some people do, like journalists do, opposition party members do. And the key is then when a party, for example, the Conservatives, 2015, come to power, they can then be held to account on their manifesto. So we saw that most clearly with Philip Hammond's backtrack on sort of the white van man tax.
That was in the budget, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so they promised in the 2015 manifesto there wouldn't be any increase in that. And then a budget 2 years later, there is an increase. But because of the manifesto, they promised to do that. They can be held to account. So people do know that when they vote on these things, whilst, of course, some manifesto pledges get broken along the way. I mean, famously, the Lib Dems with tuition fees. I mean, I'm a student, so I know all about that. But actually, I think manifestos do hold an important purpose because that's how parties are judged. Perhaps we don't, go through them with a fine-tooth comb. One or two sort of political commentators do, and that's about it. But at least we know that in theory that's what they stand for. And if we didn't have them, then they'd be going and making up policies left, right, and centre. And no one could argue against it because we just voted for them because we like them and we don't know what they want to do.
So, Rob, is that why Theresa May has decided not to have a costed manifesto, unlike the others, and has decided to make as few pledges as she possibly can so that she can't ever be held to account?
Almost certainly. I don't trust her one bit and I'm not going to be voting for her. But yeah, I think you're right. That's exactly what she's done. It's incredibly cynical and I hope people see through that. But that is what they're supposed to be doing. Fair play to Corbyn trying to cost his manifesto. I don't think it really is. And I hope he's not Prime Minister either. So we don't have much of a choice, sadly. But at least he's tried to cost it so we can look in, let's say he became Prime Minister 3-4 years. Right, he said that there would be this much more for social care, this much more for schools. This hasn't happened.
No, I mean,
fair play or not fair play. And I think it's important that we still encourage them. And Theresa May deserves a lot of, warrants a lot of criticism for not having a more detailed, costed manifesto, even for all its 80 pages or whatever. There are nuts and bolts that can really be examined properly. And that's a shame.
No, Rob, I completely understand your point. Corbyn has costed his manifesto. All he now needs to do is to remember it. And Theresa May, when she was asked by Jeremy Corbyn last night. What would the cap be? Didn't need to give an answer because they'd put nothing in the manifesto. Robin Leamington, I thank you. I've got a tweet here saying, don't you think the whole thing's a farce to prevent Brexit? None of the parties is offering a definitive choice. Well, actually, Bus Life, who sent me that tweet, both the party leaders last night said Brexit will happen. I guess the only question is, what kind of Brexit will it be? Joe says to me on Twitter, I did read the Tory and Labour manifestos. Labour was by far the best and fully costed, unlike the Tories. On Facebook, Terry says, a vote for Labour is a vote for mass immigration. Unlike Theresa May, eh, Terry? And Jill says, as for Paxman's interview with May, it was like a pair of WI volunteers discussing a jam recipe. Well, I enjoyed that. Tweet. OK, no, let's go back to the callers. Not all of them can be read out, I'm afraid to say. Paul in Walthamstow, come on, who's inspired you, Paul, or is it all a complete charade?
You are, Nigel.
Good evening.
How you doing, pal?
I'm keeping all right, matey. I'm keeping all right.
I've had a look over the manifestos, and I did the poll, and I'm only 60% on UKIP. But I tend to look at the manifestos and then look at the narrative that they try to take with their message. And I don't see, I think, what a week 5 we have. We don't have a single leader who's willing to tackle the two things that mean anything for this country right now, which is immigration and Islam. They're the only two things. Like, everything else don't mean nothing unless we tackle those two things.
Well,
and that's basically it. I live in an area where my daughter goes to school, and she's like one of 6 white Britons in a school of like 400 kids, and 2 of them are Irish, mate. You know, you want to come to these areas and see what immigration is doing to this country, and listen to the working class people and what we're saying about Islam also, because they're the only two things that mean anything, like. And no political leader is tough enough to talk about it. They tiptoe around it. And we need a leader right now. We're going off into the world. We don't need to hold people's hands in Europe and pay money. And it's just nonsense, mate.
But I mean, Paul, Theresa May, you know, set out her campaign saying she would give people like you in Walthamstow, strong and stable leadership. Do you think that's not really the case?
No, that's a lie. I've got a 9-year-old little girl, and I pay above so much for like temporary accommodation. And this is what's happening to British people in these areas, people like me. We're forgotten. And I work a full-time job and I look after my kids. And we are being forgotten in this world because it's all to do with votes. Mass immigration is votes. That's it. Because they'll want more of the same.
Paul, let me ask you something.
Yeah,
let me ask you something. What would you like our immigration policy to be?
No more. That's it.
No more. I mean, literally, enough's enough, yeah?
That is it. Enough's enough. You come to these areas, you see the population of the schools and the people. We nearly got the same population as France. And France is nearly twice the size of us. I mean, people saying, why is the NHS costing so much money? Why is there no place in schools? Why are there no homes? Nobody's scratching their head and going, there's too many people. If I had a 20-bedroom house, Nigel, and I had 60 people living there, I'm not scratching my head going, oh, you know what, I need to buy next door. I need to make myself poor and get another mortgage and buy next door because I need to hire these people. No, some of them got to go. We need somebody with a backbone who's going to say, you know what, we're not taking it no more. This is why, like, you middle-class people are, like, tiptoeing around issues. And it's like, no, immigration, Islam, stop it. People are dying.
Paul, you've given a very, very heartfelt plea, and I thank you for your call. And it's a plea that many in the administrative classes and the middle and upper middle classes in this country will sneer at. They'll sneer at people like Paul, but actually it's worth remembering, in virtually every opinion poll, nearly half the country think Paul is absolutely right in what he's saying, and he's living on the front line of it. And there is, I think, a lot of feeling.
LBC Through Your Workday with James O'Brien from 10, followed by Sheila Fogarty at 1 p.m.
But you do understand that in situations like this, we need to decide whether our actions are going to be effective or not.
We need to stand up as a country and get the army, and then as soon as stuff is in...
What do you want the army doing? What are they going to do?
Protect our streets.
Kyle, doing what?
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
Well, Paul in Walthamstow, a really heartfelt plea there. He says immigration is fundamentally changing his area, his community, and the big leaders are not representing that conversation at all. Alan in Doncaster, who's inspired you with their manifesto?
Nigel Paul from Walthamstow just inspired.
Has he?
I thought he was fantastic. He said everything that everybody wants to say. And the reason, of course, the other people, the upper class and the middle class sneer at people like him is because there are no migrants, immigrants and problems like that in the Cotswolds or in the countryside where they sit taking in their money from the businesses where they employ migrants who are taking low-paid jobs, and these people are making lots of money from this migration business. But I'm not ringing up to talk about that. I'm ringing up about Nicola Sturgeon's manifesto.
Yeah.
I'd like to put a smile on her face, a smile on your face, and a smile on every Brexiteer, because I'm a Brexiteer.
Right.
Nicola wants to stay in the EU, as does the lady in Clyde Cymru in Wales. Nicola wants to tell the British government how much to pay our families and children. She obviously wants to govern the United Kingdom, and she wants to stay in the EU. Well, I've got the solution. The solution is we hand over control of the United Kingdom to Nicola Sturgeon. She can stay in the EU. She can control the United Kingdom. And all England has to do is have a referendum to leave the United Kingdom, and then we'll be out of the United Kingdom. We'll be out of the EU. We won't even have to sign Clause 50. We won't have to pay any divorce bill. We can leave the EU, United Kingdom, still inside the EU, and then the EU will be happy, but not with their lower income, of course. And all our Brexiteers, which are predominantly in England, we can be happy out of the EU and get on with our lives.
Well, Alan, don't forget that Wales voted to leave the European Union as well, and a third of Nicola Sturgeon's voters voted to leave the EU also. Alan, it's a great fun plan. It ain't going to happen. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, here from Portugal, and it's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
The headlines might be focused on forgetting a number, but what about the actual policy? What do you think of Jeremy Corbyn's childcare plans?
Clive Bull on LBC.
We've been thinking about the nuclear family, that vision of mum, dad and their 2.4 children, and how times have changed, how we're now living longer and our kids are leaving home later. So we thought, with all this change, shouldn't we change the way we think about mortgages? So we now cater for all types of family and are trying to turn Generation Rent into Generation Buy. Mortgages for how life is now. NatWest. We are what we do.
Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
I wish I could create content like videos and music.
But I need the skills to bring my ideas to life.
I wish I could write apps, but I need to learn how to code.
I wish I could get trained up for a media career.
While studying for my GCSEs and A-levels.
The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Find out more at globalacademy.com.
Westway, there's no other way.
Swap and Save from Westway Nissan is here. It's our exclusive event where you can upgrade your old car for one of our fabulous pre-reg Nissans and make list price savings of up to 30%. Hurry, we've Micras from 7,495, Notes from 9,495 and X-Trails from only 17,995. So get swapping, get saving, get down to your nearest Westway.
Google Westway Nissan today.
Nobody likes the unknown, especially when it comes to selling your home. So don't choose an estate agent, choose Property Rescue. They'll simply buy your property direct, which means you could exchange, with money in the bank, in just 48 hours. So, no need to worry about the unknown of selling on the open market. Get that just sold feeling with Property Rescue. Fast forward to peace of mind at propertyrescue.co.uk.
The The Nigel Farage Show. Text 84850.
10 days to go till the referendum. All the party manifestos are out there printed. Forests have been felled to print these things, and I'm asking you, have any of them inspired you? Do any of them make any difference? Or, like me, do you really rather take the view that actually, however good they may be, or bad they may be, no one actually reads the blooming things? Jan says if it wasn't for Brexit, I would have voted UKIP. But any true Brexiteer can only vote Tory. That's Jan's view. Christine says we have to look at what's best for the UK as a whole, not for individuals. Well, that's very high-minded, Christine. I wonder, Barbara in Edinburgh, the SNP have launched today. Are you inspired at the thought of Indy Rev 2?
Oh no, and I think that if you lived here, you'd realise that they are flying by the seat of their pants.
Right, go on.
I hardly meet anybody who would want another referendum. So I think they know that they're just going through the motions because they can't back down. It's their whole ambition.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, there's nothing wrong, of course, in a party having a great cause, Barbara, is there?
No, I agree. But I'm just saying that's what I think, that is their cause, and that's it, regardless of what people think.
And how do you, okay, what do you think of the other party manifestos? I mean, does anything really grab you and say, wow, I love this?
Well, Paul Nuttall, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I know Paul Nuttall from, watching him over the years, really, and he's just, well, I think he's following in your footsteps a little bit, Nigel.
Okay, Barbara, let me ask you something.
Uh-huh.
He talks about banning the burqa, banning the niqab. Do you think that's acceptable in our country with its history of tolerance and freedom?
It's not him who actually said ban the burqa. It's a kind of media thing, isn't it? What he's actually said, that his faces shouldn't be covered in public. And I agree with that, because unless you've got a medical condition or something, it's a very strange thing, and it precludes you from doing so many things. And the integration thing, of course, is very important.
No, I have to try and play neutral, but
LBC at the weekend starts with Andrew Castle from 7.
I just have my doubts about this country and its determination to build hundreds of thousands of houses. You can't even apply for planning permission if you've got a bat anywhere near your place.
Andrew Castle, leading Britain's conversation. Saturday and Sunday mornings from 7 on LBC. LBC at the weekend starts with Andrew Castle, and from 12, Majid Nawaz.
ISIS didn't radicalise those 6,000 that went from Europe to join them. ISIS merely plucked the low-hanging fruit. The communities are already radicalised, and the only way to turn this around is within civil society. We have to push back against this from a young age. The second is training provided by government for us to be able to recognise the signs of radicalisation. Right now, most people don't know the difference between a Muslim who may start praying 5 times a day and a radicalised Muslim. There is a way to identify that difference, but most people wouldn't know where to begin.
Majid Nawaz, leading Britain's conversation. Saturday and Sunday from 12 on LBC.
Barbara, I lost you there briefly.
Oh, yes,
look, I'm sorry. On the integration stuff, of course that's important, and we all understand that. But there's one other question I want to ask you. Because several callers tonight have said they've seen Nuttall, they like the cut of his jib. He wants to have, or thinks we should have, a referendum on the return of the death penalty for people like Ian Brady and people like the people that murdered Fusilier Lee Rigby. Do you think that's right?
Well, it's a very difficult subject, but to be honest with you, the way things are going, I'm kind of in agreement with him.
Are you?
We're keeping people in prison. We've got problems with the prisons. Keeping people in prison for so long, it's a very difficult one. Because
Ian Brady was in prison. Ian Brady was there 51 years, wasn't he? Ian Brady was there. So anyway, what I'm saying to you is, so you don't find the idea of a referendum, perhaps, on the return of capital punishment offensive in any way?
No, not abhorrent at all. No, a referendum would be fine, because you would find out then the true feelings of people.
Yeah, no. Well, look, Barbara, I'm the last person that's going to fight against the use of a referendum to settle a key issue. I wouldn't want them used frivolously. I wouldn't want to vote as often as the Swiss do, but there are times when it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much, Barbara, for your call. And I'm going to Paris next, to Andreas. Good evening.
Good evening. Interesting conversation. You're talking about manifestos, and something that was in the last Tory manifesto was allowing people like me, British people abroad, to vote. And I was really disappointed earlier when I think it was someone from the Netherlands was saying, well, it's the EU's fault that we can't vote. It's not. It's the British government's fault that people like me cannot vote. And, I've lived in France for a while, and it's inconceivable that the French government would stop their citizens voting, and I wish it was the same in Britain.
Is this, Andreas, the 15-year rule? Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. I mean, it's a question for you. You're an MEP, Nigel. Why, just the fact that you don't live in Britain, why should that stop you voting? I mean, I did what my government said years ago: get on your bike and get a job. I was unemployed in Britain, and rather than be on welfare in Britain, I got a job in France, and now I can't vote, and I'm punished for that. I know French people who can vote in 2 countries because they have Spanish parentage and they live in France, whereas I can't vote in any. How's that fair?
Yeah, well, it's all about taxation, Andreas, isn't it? And the idea is, if you haven't paid taxes for 15 years in the United Kingdom, why should you be entitled to vote? That is the argument. What's wrong with that, Andreas?
Because voting should not be linked to paying taxes. Can you explain the difference? Well, first, could you at least explain to your listeners that it's not EU policy to stop people voting? That's British government policy.
No. It's British government policy, and there is the 15-year rule. By the way, Andreas, I don't pick up every caller on every comment they make. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. But you are absolutely 100% right. But I mean, surely voting can't be just about where you're born, can it?
Well, it should be about citizenship. I was born in Britain. I'm proud to be British, and I think it's just a real shame that I speak to people from a lot of different countries, and I don't know any other country that stops its people voting because they live abroad. I'm patriotic as much as anyone, but I just don't happen to live in Britain.
I think we're tougher than anybody on this. I think you're right, and you are also right in saying that promises were made previously that this would be addressed and nothing was done about it. Andreas, if you did have the vote, which of these manifestos would inspire you?
Well, I think they're all very poor, because I agree with what you were saying earlier. Politicians can't tell the truth, and post-Brexit, the impression I get is everyone who's for Brexit is considered racist, which is nonsense, and everyone who is against it is somehow considered unpatriotic, which is also nonsense. So we can't actually talk about the real issues. It's just people throwing insults at each other.
Yeah. Well, Andreas, I'm used to that. I thank you for your call. I get on Twitter, yes, I've read the Labour and Conservative manifestos from front to back. One reads like a business plan, the other, a double glazing sales leaflet, says Tim. And on text I get, Nigel, I'm really worried. What happens if Labour wins? I don't know who to vote for, as they're all as bad as each other, says Mark in Mill Hill. Mark, I don't think that's a particularly lonely view, I have to say. I think a lot of people are feeling like this, and I've got a feeling, and I'm not trying to drive it there, but I've got a feeling the turnout will be lower than anybody can imagine. And my last call of the evening, I've saved the best till last, I'm sure of it, is Paul in Exeter. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Can you hear me okay? I
can, yes. So come on. Who's inspires you, Paul?
Well, the thing is, I've always been a Tory voter. Well, I was Labour before, and then obviously after the disaster of maxing out the credit card. Then I went to Tory. But this is the first election in so many years now where I don't actually know who I'm going to vote for. Because one thing, I look at Jeremy Corbyn and I think, all the bad things with the police and everything with the cuts and everything else. And then I think to myself, with the Tories, reeling the finances in. So I'm one of those voters that is, in between, Nigel. And, I've got to commend you for all your great stuff with Brexit and all that stuff. Sorry.
On balance, Paul, do you think if on the 8th of June it's a bit wet and windy in the West Country, which it often is, although I've had some nice holidays down there too, but if it's a bit wet and windy and you've had a busy day, will you actually be bothered to go out and vote?
I will. Oh, of course, yes. It's my right to vote. I push all my friends. I go to Facebook and I go to all my
But it's also your right not to vote, Paul. It's also your right not to vote. Paul, I've got to go. We're done. I thank you. Paul says he'll vote come what may. I am feeling a bit cynical about the whole process of the publication of these masses of paper in manifestos. Yeah, I know we can read them online too. I'm not sure they make very much difference at all. Politicos are concerned about them. Political geeks are concerned about them. People like Andy in the Netherlands read them cover to cover, but they are few and far between. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock from London. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you. And coming up, well, the headlines today have been focused on Jeremy Corbyn